Welcome to another episode of the Silver BlackCast. It's your brother Marquise here with your boy Rocco. We're just a couple of diehard Raider fans here to bring you a little bit of info, some passion, and some chaos straight from the black hole. Every episode, we're going to drop down into four segments, just like four downs on a football field. On first down, we're going to talk about the news and notes, what's hot, what's happening in Raider Nation. On second down, we're going to break down our predictions on our 53-man roster. On third down, Rocco's going to go deep into his thoughts on some interesting thoughts on Maxx Crosby. And on fourth down, where we never punt on your questions. You bring the heat and we'll bring the answers. So mash that like and subscribe button and join us on our roller coaster here on the Silver and BlackCast. Let's get it.
Let's get it.
All right, Rocco. Let's get this thing started. So we're going to start off with some of the bigger news that's happened in Raider Nation as of late. And that is with the trade rumors of Mr. Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. This rumor started kind of on a Hondo Carpenter podcast. And let's start with your thoughts.
What are my thoughts? My thoughts are it's very unlikely to happen. All due respect to Hondo Carpenter and his source. I haven't seen him reported anywhere else. It's exciting. The thought's exciting. It's intriguing. One of the best pass rushers in the league. Of course, you can't help but get excited about the idea of it. I don't see it happening. I don't know what you'd have to give up for him, but it would be substantial. And then you have to sign him to a substantial contract extension on top of that. And I don't know. As exciting as it would be, I don't know if that makes the most sense with what you're already allocating to Crosby. It's a rumor, but I think it's just that. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. First off, I'm not one to believe, because just out of lack of evidence, the breaking news power of Hondo Carpenter. If that reported came from a Schefter or an Ian Rappaport or something like that, then maybe there's a little bit more credibility. But coming from a Hondo positive Carpenter, I take that with a grain of salt. All due respect to him. I know he works hard and he seems like a great guy, but doesn't have the history of really breaking news. So that being said, what if it did happen? It would be spectacular. I think that Patrick Graham's defense, like every other defense, is predicated off getting to the quarterback. We have a very young secondary that's going to take time to be able to reach their potential. And what's best for a young secondary than a powerful pass rush? So while I do think that we could use it and we need it, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense at this time. I mean, in the life cycle of where our team is, does signing Trey Hendrickson take you over the top? You're looking at a team that most people, even optimistic people, would say, hey, you're looking at a team that is going to be between 7 to 10 wins. Does Trey Hendrickson move the needle to say, hey, this is a playoff, going from a team that may be fighting for a playoff spot to, yes, I'm a playoff team. Yes, I'm contending. And will Trey Hendrickson being part of that team in the short period of time he has left in his prime lead you to that conclusion that that's where the Raiders are going? And I don't know if that moves the needle enough to go after a guy like that at his age.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I don't want to put limits on what is possible this season, and of course he would help, but like you're kind of alluding to, you have to keep an eye on the long term, and does it make sense to allocate whatever resources it's going to take to get him, and then on top of that, the contract. And I don't know that it's a weakness to begin with. Obviously the idea of pairing him with Crosby is exciting, but you do have Crosby already, and I'm a big believer in Kuntz. We'll talk about the preseason game, but I was very encouraged to see him get that sack. And if Kuntz picks up where he left off before the injury, which I fully expect he will, I don't really see why you would trade for Trey Hendrickson. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So just to play devil's advocate and have a little fun, I'm going to give you a couple trade scenarios. You tell me yes or no if you're doing it.
Okay.
Trey Hendrickson, first-round pick.
No.
Trey Hendrickson, Malcolm Kuntz in a third.
It's tempting. It's tempting, but you got to understand it's not just Malcolm Kuntz, it's a third, and it's also all the salary cap you're going to have to allocate to him, going forward. So it's not just what you're giving up. As I keep saying, you have to keep the salary cap in mind as well. That's very tempting, but I'm going to say no still.
Fair enough. Well, you heard it here first. Malcolm Kuntz in the third, not good enough to move the needle here on the Silver and BlackCast. Now let's move on to, you alluded to that preseason game. Let's talk about that. And, there was obviously some good things that we saw out of that. Pete Carroll stood true to his word. He said that everybody would be live, and we saw the starters go out there and play the first drives. And then we saw a handful of starters play into the first quarter, and some even into the waning moments of the first half. So did anybody jump out at you that helped their case for making the team, or just for having success on the team?
Yeah, some guys jumped out. I'm not answering your question exactly as far as individuals, but preseason being preseason, but the first team offense, first team defense basically both played one series each. The defense gets a quick 3 and out, and the offense scores a touchdown. I don't know what more you could ask for. I would further say, with what we read in the lead up to the game, with the team emphasizing really working on that connection between Geno and Thornton down the field. Also not just reading about Kuntz, but Carroll's comments himself about, Kuntz getting off to a little bit of a slow start coming back from his injury, and then really coming on the last 10 days or so, to then in this preseason game see Geno and Thornton hook up down the field for a touchdown, and then to see Kuntz with a sack. Those are, if you ask me before the game, that might be the two things I would want to see most. So I thought that was very encouraging. And sure, a bunch of other, individuals stood out. Zamir White. I thought Wilson flashed again. Jamal Adams made another play or two. What do you think?
I think you named the exact people I was going to go into. I thought the fact seeing Dante Thornton make a tough, and I think it's pretty underratedly tough back shoulder catch for the touchdown, and what ball placement by Geno, to be honest with you. To see them connect on that, and I don't care who they're playing, it's encouraging to see. I thought that for the first time that we really got to see, we've been hearing a lot about how great Zamir White's been looking in practice, and Pete Carroll's referred to him as the hammer, and how pleased he is with him. And I thought last game was the first time we really got to see him, I don't want to say be showcased, but really see him run the ball, how much more explosive and quick he looked. He's alluded to that he lost some weight. Maybe he got a little too big and too muscular last year. But in either case, I think it's clear to see that this running scheme fits him better than what happened last year, as well as the body frame that he's got right now leans to him having the most success. Tyree Wilson, this guy, I think he's really paced himself to be in position to break out. I think he's playing with confidence out there. I think the thing I like is that he's not necessarily making a whole bunch of tackle for losses or a whole bunch of sacks and things like that, although we've heard about him being in the backfield frequently. But what I see is that the guy is always around the ball out there in the preseason. He's always in the group making tackles. Whether it's a play behind the line, he's always right there, or he's always flushing someone to someone else. So he's making an impact. He's being disruptive, and I don't know how that's going to apply to the stats, but it's way further along than what we've seen even the last 2 years. Even though last year I think he finished stronger than people give him credit for, this is a whole nother level. This is a whole nother player that we're seeing right now, and hopefully that carries over into the regular season.
It's exciting. He's been consistently disruptive, just like what you're saying. He consistently flashes. Like you said, he finished stronger last year. I think he's gradually gotten better. When we drafted him, the thought on him was maybe he was a little bit of a project, and then, he doesn't set the world on fire immediately. Everybody's ready to give up on him, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? And he's slowly getting better. I've said in a couple other podcasts, I envision him continuing to get better, and he could get a lot better. He could still make that leap. There's no reason why he can't make a leap still. It's only his third year. And he's showing potential that could be the case consistently in this preseason.
Absolutely. And so we talked about some of the positive things. Unfortunately, we got to mention some of the things that went wrong. And the one thing that we need to really address is the injury to AOC. He took a tough sack and he got injured. He got injured with a broken wrist. Pete Carroll said he's out 6 to 8 weeks. And, it's pretty much a pretty bad ending to what was a pretty disappointing preseason for AOC. So the question now that most Raider Nation is saying is, now what, Rocco?
I'm sure we're going to sign a veteran. The two names you keep hearing, and I think, for good reason. I'm not going to play the contrarian this time. I think DTR and Tyler Huntley make a lot of sense. They were both actually released today, so they're both available. I think those are a couple, good options, all things considered. I'm sure there'll be others that are available. Maybe a couple of guys will be available via trade. But I'm sure we're going to bring in a veteran.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough break for AOC. But I think it's a little premature for the team to rely on Cam Miller as their number 2 right now.
Yeah.
Maybe, he would have to show a whole heck of a lot within the next week, and they'd have to feel really good about him to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and just bring in somebody, put him on the practice squad, and Cam Miller's our number 2. One of the good things about playing 3 preseason games is we actually have that week in between now and the first game. So really it's 2 weeks. So they do have an opportunity to try to get a quarterback, especially a veteran, up to speed within a couple weeks. And obviously with the hopes that he never has to play it down. But if he, God forbid the worst would happen with Geno Smith, hopefully it would at least be a few games into the season, that veteran would have been in the building for a few weeks and feel a little more comfortable with Chip Kelly's system by then. Which leads me also to an interesting thing that I think a lot of people are not aware of the NFL change in a ruling. So you see here, the NFL, usually if a player in a situation like AOC being hurt, he would have to make the 53-man roster, and then, which would force the Raiders to cut somebody that they probably would not like to, just to put him on the roster, then to a day later move him to the IR. Well, the NFL's changed that this year for those people who don't know, and they're allowed to do this with 2 players. They're allowed to put them immediately in IR, and they do not count onto the 53-man roster. So obviously the 2 people that they're going to put on there are Lonnie Johnson, the safety, which we've talked about earlier in earlier podcasts, and AOC now. So both of them will be on the IR, but it helps because it allows the Raiders to keep 2 more players on their roster and not subject them to being poached from the practice squad or being picked up by another team entirely.
Yeah, and I believe they could come back after 4 games.
Correct. So I think that's a good rule. I don't always think that the NFL's made great decisions, but I do think that's a fair rule. I think it's a good rule for the teams. And Raiders right away are benefiting from this new rule because we have 2 players that fit the bill for this. So that leads us to the last thing we want to talk about. Big day coming up. Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific time is cut day, where the Raiders are going to go from 90 to 53 men. And this is always a fun exercise. It's a fun time of the year for me. What do you think about these cut days, Rocco?
Yeah, it's just it is exciting to see, the 53-man roster after these cuts are made. Your heart goes out to the guys that don't make it. Of course, a lot of them will still be with the organization on the practice squad, which is, super important. They're the practice squad is part of the team as well. But yeah, it is always exciting when the final cuts are made and you can look at your roster and this is, what you're going into week 1 as your 53-man roster for the 2025 Las Vegas Raiders. So yeah, it is exciting.
Yeah, and it's so funny because pretty much with every team, like 45, 46, 47, these spots are already pretty much claimed. We already know this. And it's always those 4 or 5 or 6 spots on different teams where we get so excited about, because there's always some player who doesn't make it, or someone who does make it we weren't expecting. And it's just, the NFL does such a great job just marketing everything that they do, that you're just like, man, I'm going crazy thinking about this, when realistically it's going to affect like 4 or 5 guys that you weren't expecting. So hats off to the NFL, man, because they make us crazy and mad with this. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.
Me neither. Yeah, we're obsessed with every aspect of the NFL, and I wouldn't want it any other way either.
Yeah. So that takes us to second down, ladies and gentlemen. Second down, where we're going to project our specific 53-man roster. So, as normal, we got to start with the most important position on the field, the quarterback position. So, Rocco, I'm going to let you start this one off with, who do you think how many quarterbacks are we carrying? Who's going to make the cut?
Well, I have 3 quarterbacks, obviously Geno, Miller, and a veteran, to be determined. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. What about you?
I agree with that. I have the same thing. But here's the interesting thing about that. While I agree with you that we're going to pick up a veteran and make sure that we have one going into 53-man roster, it would be interesting if there's somebody that they really like to keep and they don't want to get rid of. And so they decide that, hey, we may roll with 2 quarterbacks and then just add a quarterback to the practice squad after the case so that they can keep one more roster spot. So I'm interested to see if that's a route that they take, because they can always, let's say it's like you said, a DTR. They can always sign him on Tuesday to the practice squad, and then he doesn't keep it and does not count against our 53-man roster if they decide they want to keep a look at some other player at another position. So while I agree that I think that will happen beforehand, I expect the Raiders probably to sign somebody tomorrow, if not already by the time they end this podcast. But it would be an interesting move if they have thoughts of keeping one extra player and trying to add these guys to the practice squad.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense with the AOC injury. If he was healthy, I could see maybe keeping O'Connell as your backup and maybe putting Miller on the practice squad. But now, who's going to be your number 2? Is it going to be Miller until the veteran learns the offense, like you say, in DTR on the practice squad, or vice versa? Is he going to be?
The reason I bring that up is doesn't the NFL have the new rule, or the rule last year with with your third emergency quarterback can be active?
Yeah, but he has to be on the 53, I believe.
Does he? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. We could look at that. But I don't think you could just bring him off the practice squad.
Fair enough. I'm over here. I'm playing 4D chess over here. Taking that AOC injury and turning that water into wine, baby. Keep the party going.
Don't forget, we got Big East too. He could be the.
All right. So that leads us to the next position that we'll talk about. Both of us have three quarterbacks making the roster. But let's move on to our halfback predictions, and we'll see if we align there. I think the quarterback one was a little easy. Let's see where we're at with the halfbacks, our running backs room. How many are you going with, Rocco?
Well, I went heavy here, and in all honesty, I probably went a little bit more with. So I went with 5, which will probably, if I had to guess, we'll probably go with 4. To me, it looks like McCormick might be the odd man out, but I'm a big fan of his personally, so I couldn't cut him myself. So I got Genty. I think White's established himself as the number 2. Mostert, who I could see as a surprise cut, but I have Mostert making it. I have Lobby making it. I think he brings some special teams value, and he's a little different style. If maybe he works in a little bit as a third down back, possibly. And like I said, I could see McCormick being the odd man out, but I just like him. I thought he was impressive last year. I thought even in this preseason, he's just one of those guys. The first man never brings him down. I'd have a hard time parting with him, so I couldn't part with him. So I went with 5.
Yeah, I'm a cold-hearted son of a bitch. McCormick's out. So I went with 4. I just think it's going to be hard to carry 5 guys at that position, especially when you drafted Genty at number 6. You know he's going to be the workhorse, which means most of the other backs are going to have special team value. That's what brings Dylan Lobby onto the team. He's not going to make it as a running back, but he will be there because he's a heck of a gunner, and they've been using him as a returner. So I expect to see him make the 53, even though he's a running back only by classification, really, as far as production at running back position, you won't get that. As you said before, Zamir White, Zeus is entrenched, I think, as the number 2 right now, which you alluded to that Mostert could get cut. And because he does not bring a lot of special teams value, and I agree with that, but I do think that running back room is very young with not a lot of experience. And I think having Mostert, having a veteran in the room will be important, especially in the early weeks with Ashton Genty, a rookie running back taking a lot of carries. So I could see his value going beyond what he's going to do on the field. And then them trying to sneak McCormick onto the practice squad, because I do agree. I thought he was impressive in his limited time. But I just don't think he brings enough special teams value for him to make the roster right now.
Yeah, that's very fair.
All right, let's move on to our offensive linemen. We're going to lump together our tackles, guards, and centers together, and just tell me how many old linemen you got making the roster, Rocco. And I think the good thing that we've finally got out of Pete Carroll in today's press conference is he finally said that JPJ will be the starter at right guard. Yeah. Now he did not commit to him to any position for the whole long term, but he said week 1, JPJ will be there at right guard, and that's honestly, I don't know if that has more to do with the injury of Alex Kappa and his lack of availability, or he's just he was testing JPJ, give him an opportunity to deal with a little adversity and earn his spot, just like everyone else has to earn their spot. But in either case, JPJ is named the starter. And so let's see who else is going to be on the field with him, Rocco.
Well, at tackle, I have Miller, Glaze, obviously, as our stars, and I have Mumford and Grant. And guard, I have Parham and JPJ, like you said, with Kappa and Rogers as the backups, and I have Meredith at center. And then, of course, JPJ could always back him up. Even Parham could back him up if need be at center. So what is that, 2, 4... 9 linemen.
Silver and BlackCast does math, guys. Everybody, here we go. Silver and BlackCast does math.
Slowly but surely. Yeah, I guess that's 9 linemen.
Yeah, I have the same exact thing. 9 linemen, the same linemen you mentioned. The only thing I would like to add to this is that I could see a situation where they might want to poach somebody that's getting cut here. Depending on how they feel about the health of Alex Kappa. I know that Pete Carroll mentioned him being the backup in week 1, but, things change with who's available. And, not that I think this guy's going to get cut, but I'll tell you this. Thayer Munford's play has not been inspiring to me this preseason from what I've seen. It's been a little concerning to me, really. I feel like I've noticed him playing significantly worse. I'm hoping that he is able to rectify that if he gets an opportunity. But what do you think about what you've seen out of Thayer Munford thus far?
I think he struggled, but you know how I feel about preseason. It would be different if I've never seen him play in a real game. I've seen him play enough in real games where he was solid enough. I mean, he wasn't, I don't know. He wasn't Jason Peters or Orlando Pace, but he was a solid enough guy where I think if we need him, we could get by with Mumford. So I'm not overly concerned. Listen, if there's somebody available, which I kind of doubt because it's hard to find these tackles to begin with, but if there is somebody available that we like better, then yeah, I'm all for it, and that's certainly a possibility. But I'm not overly concerned.
I hear that, but I do want to correct something you said. I believe you meant to say that he's not Art Shell or Lincoln Kennedy right now. Not these other bums that didn't wear the silver and black.
I stand corrected.
So we have to let's move on to a fun position here, a wide receiver. This is going to be interesting because I don't know if we aligned here. For people watching, Rocco and I we try not to compare notes when we talk about these things so we can hear each other's individual thoughts. So, Rocco, who did you come up with? How many people you got making the roster at the wide receiver position, and who you got?
I might be a little lighter here. I don't know. Maybe you have 6. I have 5. Jacoby Myers, Thornton, Tucker, Beck, and Bachman. Those are my 5.
Okay,
so him a lot on the IR. He was the one I had a little bit of a hard time with, but I feel like you could get him on the IR, on the practice squad.
All right, that's interesting. I see. I actually had the same ones, but I have 6. I put Tommy Mellott on the roster. I think that just teams tend to want to keep their draft picks on the rosters, and on top of that, they know that he's making. When they drafted him, they knew that he was making a transition from quarterback to wide receiver. I'd be surprised to see them give up on him so quickly. And I think that there's a gamemanship that goes to making these rosters, and I think that when you're looking at that roster spot with 6 for the 6th wide receiver, and I say to myself, hey, who's more likely to get picked up? A 29-year-old journeyman that's never played, that hasn't really played in the NFL. I think he's only got maybe 2 or 3 NFL catches, and Alex Bachman, or a guy who was just a 6th-round pick for us, who reportedly had other teams that were interested in him. And I feel like there's a larger chance of being able to get Alex Bachman onto the practice squad than it is to get Tommy Mellott. So to me, is Tommy Mellott a better wide receiver right now than Alex Bachman? Absolutely not. But do you have a better likelihood of keeping Mellott instead of Bachman on the practice squad? I think if you want to keep them both, I think that's the route you have to go.
I hear you. I don't know that I agree with that. I understand where you're coming from. If Bachman beat him out, he beat him out, and I don't, there's always a risk that somebody else could pick him up. I think you could get away with a stashing Tommy Mellott on the practice squad. I could be wrong. It could work the other way. Other teams were impressed with Alex Bachman in the preseason, and you try to stash him on the practice squad, and somebody picks him up. So, I don't think it's that much of a clear-cut difference there in risk. And to me, then you got to keep the better player.
Yeah, but to me, this is the way I look at it too, right? And again, this is what makes it fun trying to predict these things. I take the human element into it, and for me, I'm like, all right, which one's going to really piss me off if I lose? So if I lose Alex Bachman, what's the likelihood of him putting together a hell of a career the rest of his way? And and if he does, I'm like, hats off to him, great job. But odds are, if you keep him on the team, he's probably not on the team next year. I don't want to limit the guy, but odds are he doesn't make the team the following year, or he goes to another team, he's on the practice squad, and he's bouncing around, because that's what we've seen for him for the last 7 years, practice squads. And in fact, he mentioned in his press conference that he's the longest tenured practice squad player in the NFL. And that's true, because when he first became practice squad, you were only allowed to be on the practice squad 2 years. And so he was on for 2 years. Then during COVID, they changed that rule, and he's been on the practice squad ever since for the last 5 years. So 7 years on the practice squad. I'm rolling the dice to say that this guy's not going to turn into a great player. Now, Tommy Mellott, all of a sudden I cut this guy. He gets picked up by somebody else. He turns into a great player, and I'm freaking pulling my hair out, even though there's not much of it. I'm pulling it out the rest of myself, saying to myself, I can't believe I let this guy go in training camp for Alex Bachman.
Okay. Yeah, I see your point of view. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I get your point. I just feel like if, you preach competition and, you have a long extended look, and one guy, from what we know, I mean, we couldn't be wrong. We're not watching practice all day, every day, but reports are, Bachman, was clearly better. I think it's just kind of simple in that regard, but I understand your point of view as well. We'll see.
I get it, but will Alex Bachman be better in a year or two? That's the question, that you got to go into as well when you're cutting these guys. Yeah, let's be real. In almost every circumstance, majority of time, veterans are going to be further around better than these rookies are, And so at some level, the future's got to be taken into account, as opposed to where these two players are right now in their careers,
For sure.
We could sign Amari Cooper today, and he's going to be better than Jack Besh, but that doesn't mean we should keep Amari Cooper over Jack Besh. So some of that's got to be taken into account as well. But when you're preaching competition, one guy that I do want to mention that I think that I had a tough time in deciding whether I was going to have him make the roster or not was actually Colin Johnson. Everything I've heard, Colin Johnson's having a heck of a training camp as well. So I was really torn on whether I want to add him to the roster as well, because I think he brings another element too. Bachman's kind of that smaller. I know they don't necessarily play him only in the slot, but slot kind of guy. Same with Tommy Malott. That's what they want to use him for. Tucker is a smaller guy. Maybe you need one of those. I know you have Myers and Thornton, and you have the tight ends, but maybe you want a different type of wide receiver, especially if he's had production and played well in practice as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as far as stylistically, and I think he's definitely right there on the bubble. When is Shock me if he made the team?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right, so we took a little bit with that wide receiver. That was a good discussion there. Let's move on to our tight end room. How many you got, Rocco?
I've got 3. This is probably pretty easy. Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Ian Thomas.
Yeah, I have the same situation going, the same 3 guys. I did give some thought to Ishmael and Runyon.
He's looked good.
Yeah, Ishmael and Runyon, but I would expect those guys, one if not both those guys, to make the practice squad. Yeah. Not so much to the 53-man roster at this time.
I agree.
All right, this should be an interesting one. Where are you at on defensive tackles?
I went heavy on defensive line, defensive tackle, and defensive ends.
Now, hold on. Before you go on to that, do you think that how deep you went on both those is more of a sign that we don't have a guy that's really just the guy, or do you just think it's more of a sign of just having depth at that position?
I think number one, just me personally, I like being deeper on the defensive line. I've spoken about this before. Depth's important all over the roster, but a lot of positions, the depth is more so in case of injury, right?
Sure.
To me, defensive line's a little different because there's usually a heavy rotation. So it's depth, but it's depth that's going to play. I think, most of the best defensive lines around the league are deep defensive lines where they could rotate the guys in and keep them fresh. So to me, depth on the defensive line is more valuable. And, just doing this exercise, we have a lot of quality defensive linemen in my mind. So,
So if, let's say, defensive tackle today, like how many DTs did you keep?
I got Butler, Lalou, Booker, Pegues, Hemingway, and Fatu.
I kept the same thing. I just kept Hemingway as an edge and not as a defensive tackle. So I kept 5, you kept 6, but it was really, we kept the same guys. It's just I have them categorized somewhere else. So my question is, just in general, when I led back to this, so if Christian Wilkins was healthy and on the roster, do you think you're still keeping that many amount of defensive tackles? Because how many snaps he's going to eat up individually. So that's why I was leading to that question is it the depth or is it the lack of having a go-to guy there that keeps you to keep the number so high?
I don't know. It's a fair question. Maybe you would keep one less guy. All those guys are going to make the team. Maybe the only question is Fatu in my mind. Yeah, looking at those guys, whether Wilkins was here or not, those guys are going to make the team. Butler, of course, Lalou, of course. Booker's looked good. We just traded for him, and the two rookies we drafted, obviously we were high on them, and they flashed some in the preseason. So I just think it's more so than anything, it's good depth, which that's a great position to have good depth.
All right, so I know this isn't the question right now, but might as well. You know what? We'll save this for topic 4. For fourth down. So, all right. So we got your defensive tackles. I went the same way. I had 5 kept and the same exact ones. Adam Butler, Booker, I can never say his name right. Lalou, Pegues and Fotu. Those are the 5 defensive tackles I have making the roster. What about your edges?
I kept one extra here too. So I got obviously Crosby, Kuntz, Wilson, obviously, and then I went with not only Snowden, Andre Carter as well. I think he's flashed enough. He makes my 53. So I kept 5.
So hold on. So you went with 11 defensive linemen total.
Yeah.
All right. 11 defensive linemen. All right. For defensive ends, I went with, I got Crosby and Kuntz and Wilson. I went with Hemingway because he was listed as an edge there. And in the last one, I went with Snowden as well. But I'm curious if his pending DUI case with the NFL is going to have any impact on whether they keep him or not.
I have no idea. I wouldn't know how to answer that. I have no idea. I have him making the roster. And like I said, normally I think he would keep 4, but, Wilson's going to play some inside. I think he's going to play quite a bit inside. I think Andre Carter's a talented kid who's flashed enough that I think it makes sense to maybe keep a 5th one.
Okay, so those were those defensive end predictions, So we got 11 defensive linemen for Rocco. We have 10 for me there. So I'm interested to see where he starts trimming the fat because he's a little heavier than
I might have more than 53. I like to.
Yeah, you might have 55 on your roster there, Rocco. We might have to trim a little fat because
I like to see what I could get away with.
Yeah, because you're already one extra running back, and now you're one extra defensive lineman. So you're two heavier than me. So I know you were talking about that.
I think I was one less receiver though, right?
I had 6 wide receivers. You had 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're still one heavier than me right now. So we'll see. Actually, no, I take that back. I had 5. No, that's right. I have 6. I said Bachman. All right, so again, here we go. Silver and BlackCast do math. Sorry, guys. Let's go on to the linebackers.
Linebackers, I have Roberts, White, Pratt, Adams, and Eichenberg.
Okay, so you went 5 there. So that's where you trim the fat a little bit. I went with 6. You said the last one you went Eichenberg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went with 6. I did the same 5, but I also kept Lindenberg as well. Basically for the same reason that I've said before, that I don't think teams really like to cut their draft picks unless they give them a reason to cut them. I think that we're at the stage right now where John Spytek really wants to build with the youth, and I don't think he's going to want to cut a lot of the draft picks regardless of how late they were drafted. And some of these guys are going to be hard to get back on the roster. And I know that you got them cutting 2 right now. I don't have them cutting any. The truth will probably be somewhere in the middle. So, all right. So the linebacking room, we have I have 6. Rocco has 5. Let's move on to the cornerbacks.
Okay, I have 5. I have Stokes, Porter, Blue Kelly, Richardson. And I have Greedy Vance.
Oh, there he is.
I have Greedy Vance, and I have Darnay Holmes as maybe a mild surprise cut.
So we're on the same page. I got Greedy Vance making it. I got Darnay Holmes out. I think the writing's been on the wall for Darnay Holmes. He's been playing pretty late in these preseason games. So I think that's pretty telling stat. It's interesting with the Caillou Blue Kelly. For those of you Raider fans who haven't been able to keep up with some of the latest news, obviously he's been injured. He's got a little hamstring that's bothering him right now, and he hasn't practiced the last couple of days. But he was starting to get first team reps at outside corner, and then also at nickelback on the depth chart. Unofficially, he's listed as a 3rd nickelback, but he was getting first team reps at nickelback, and I think that's just a sign of them feeling like maybe he's one of their best 3 cornerbacks and trying to get them all on the field at the same time. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. A very interesting competition. That's why I kind of see it playing out that way. I see, as we know, Chin playing a lot of nickel, and then when they want to go to more of a traditional nickel package where it's a true corner in that role, I see a competition between Vance and, like you're saying, Blue Kelly, depending on if he's not starting on the outside, which he certainly could be, the opening day starter on the outside. So I see it kind of playing out that way.
Yeah, Pete Carroll talked about in his press conference today about him recently going back and watching Greedy Vance's college tape again.
Yeah.
And I think if anybody's going to spend extra time to go back and watch more film on a guy, that must mean that they're pretty interested in keeping this guy as part of the program. So that's part of that played a lot of role for me keeping Greedy Vance over Darnay Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
And let's move on to the last one. I'm interested to see where you went here with our safety.
I kept 4: Palomao, Chin, Edmonds, and Smith. And it pains me to have to release Trey Taylor.
That's what I was interested to see. I was interested to see if you were going to cut Trey Taylor. I know he's a guy you like a lot. I have the exact same 4. I was really interested and again, we're not counting Lonnie Johnson because, as we said earlier, he will fit into the IR role, and so he does not count against the 53-man roster. So I have the same 4. The other person I was interested in or I don't want to say interested, but I was surprised that I haven't seen more buzz about. I thought he would have an opportunity to get a little bit more time. Was Thomas Harper?
Me too. He was one of my last cuts. I actually originally had him making the roster, but I just doing this exercise, I left him off just because, like you're saying, I just haven't read or heard anything really about him. I haven't noticed him in the preseason. Maybe that's on me, but I haven't noticed him in the games. I haven't read anything about him, which I'm surprised about as well. So yeah, originally I had him, but then I left him off for that same exact reason.
Yeah, I thought the fact that when Lonnie Johnson went down, that Chris Smith was taking his snaps to the first team, I thought that was telling of where they see him. And then obviously with Terrell Edmonds being added, and all of a sudden he is now taking those first team reps where they see him in this defense. So that leads us to the last and probably most anticlimactic position, the special teams edition. So who you got? How many special teamers do you think we need to have?
Well, we got our 3 specialists, right? That'll take us to our 53.
Yep. And those obviously are Carlson, AJ Cole, and Bubbenmeyer, our long snapper. So those are our 53-man rosters. That takes us done. We're done with second down. Let's go to third down, or Rocco's thoughts. Tell us what we're talking about today, Rocco.
Okay. So as you know, I always like to rewatch the prior Raiders season in the lead up to week 1, which I could not bring myself to do this year. As miserable as last season was, I just couldn't do it. But I did rewatch one game. I rewatched the upset in Baltimore in week 2, right? And it was just an awesome reminder of how dominant Maxx Crosby is when healthy. It was just incredible to watch. He wrecked the game. First couple possessions, he had a sack, 1 or 2 tackles for a loss, batted ball at the line of scrimmage. It was discontinued all game long. It felt like damn near every play he was disrupting the offense. Had another sack late in the fourth quarter to help close out the game. I think he ended up with 2 sacks, 7 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss. The batted pass down at the line of scrimmage ended up winning Defensive Player of the Week. And it was just an awesome reminder. This was before the high ankle sprain. And he dominated the football game, which leads me to, I'm going to make 2 bold statements, a bold statement and a bold prediction. I've been watching and rooting for the Raiders since the early 80s. I think Maxx Crosby is the best defensive player I've ever seen in the silver and black.
Wow.
Yeah. That's my bold statement. My bold prediction is, coming off of last season, I believe it's the most frustrating season of Maxx Crosby's career, with the injury, with the losing, just the way the season played out. I feel like coming off that season now, 100%, fully healthy, fully bought into the new regime. The new regime making a commitment to him with the contract extension, with a better culture around him under Pete Carroll. My prediction is Maxx Crosby is going to win Defensive Player of the Year this year.
Wow. Well, you heard that here first, ladies and gentlemen. That is a bold prediction because that's twofold, right? Because not only are you saying Maxx Crosby is going to have a hell of a year, but to be considered Defensive Player of the Year, that means the Raiders are in contention playing some good football. So not only is he saying that he's going to be the great Defensive Player of the Year, but he's also saying, in essence, that the Raiders are going to be a playoff team. Because I don't know how many.
I'm definitely saying that. I fully understand.
We saw that with Khalil Mack, right? We saw that with Khalil Mack. I mean, Khalil Mack didn't even have a spectacular year the year he won Defensive Player of the Year. We've seen him have better years than that. But because the Raiders were so good and because he was so dominant with the Raiders being good, it kind of gave him the push he needed to get that Defensive Player of the Year. And so there you go. You heard it first. Raiders playoff team with Maxx Crosby leading the helm and winning the Defensive Player of the Year. Now that would be this is the fourth down, guys. We're going to bring these questions up. So first question we have from Raider Mike. It says here, do you see the Raiders making any impact additions after the cut day?
I can see them making a couple additions. I don't know what qualifies as an impact addition. I see them most likely making one or two moves towards the bottom of their roster. Of course, they're going to have to add a veteran quarterback. That'll probably be prior to cut day, but it could be after the cut day. But if you mean by impact, making like some kind of trade or something of that nature, I don't envision that. But yeah, there's going to be some additional retooling with the roster, and that'll continue throughout the entire season, as we know.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's tough to find impact players at this time of the year. So maybe you sign one and he ends up being an impact player, but usually that means that you've had some injuries or someone that give that guy an opportunity. There's not a lot of impact, quote unquote, impact players floating around free agency right now. Let's go on to the next question. Our second question of the day. This one comes from Raider Al in Georgia. It says here, now that the roster is cut to 53, what position groups are the deepest and the thinnest?
Deepest, I mean, we just did the exercise. I'm going to say defensive line. I'll say running back. We debated a little bit there. We're probably going to have to release a good back, whether we can stash him on the practice squad or not. Thinnest, I'm going to cop out and say quarterback because we only have two healthy ones right now.
Fair enough. I would say my deepest is probably, I think the tight end room is pretty deep. And then at running back, the thinnest, I'm going to go with the cornerback room until proven otherwise, until these guys, we have some talent and potential there, but until they do something, as a wise coach said, that all potential means is that you haven't done shit yet. Then I'm going to go along with that. So until this potential is realized, I'm going to say the cornerback room is our thinnest right now. Our third question here. Oh, this is a good one here. We have this from, who's that from? I can't even read. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. It looks like a Selena. Put dollar signs in there and everything. It's kind of crazy there. So it says here, do you think that Tyree Wilson can become a Pro Bowl caliber player?
Yeah, I do. He has all the talent in the world. I always say you combine all the talent in the world, like he does. You combine a talented player like that with a good attitude and good coaching. The sky's the limit. Different guys. Put it together. On different timelines, and maybe his is a little slower than others, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen for him. Everything we've read, everything we've seen in the preseason games, everything we've read in training camp has all been positive. So, yeah, it's certainly possible. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, the question would be, how quickly are you expecting a Pro Bowl performance? I don't know if he's ready to jump into being a Pro Bowler this year, but I definitely think he's moving in the right track. He's looking, let's have a successful 2025, play well enough to get your 5th-year option picked up, and then start to take off from there. We know that he was slower to develop. He was a project coming out to begin with, and he was injured, basically had a redshirt rookie year. And then, all the drama that happened last year. So hopefully he's poised to make that leap, and hopefully he's a Pro Bowl player this year. But I think you have to have with realistic expectations as a stepping stone to get to that level where that level is. And I think he's headed in the right direction. All right, next question. This one is from JC at work. It says here, should we be concerned with Malcolm Koontz's slow start?
No, I don't know what that means. I from my understanding, Pete Carroll said, and some of the reporters were that he was, he hasn't made a noticeable impact, but I believe Pete Carroll said he got off to a slow start, but has really come on strong the last 10 days or so. So to me, that sounds positive. And then, compound that with him getting a sack, in limited time in the preseason game. No, I'm not concerned. I mean, of course, there's got to be some kind of level of concern coming off an injury. I understand that. But, I'm going to take the optimistic point of view. Carroll said he's been coming on strong. You see him get the sack in the first quarter of the preseason game. I think he's gonna be awesome.
For me, there's a level of concern. For me, I'm concerned because it's not unexpected concern. I expect him to get off to a slower start. He's coming off a horrific knee injury. ACL is a serious injury. I know that we because Adrian Peterson was able to bounce back in 8 months and lead the league in rushing, that we consider ACL like a sprained ankle nowadays. But it's a significant injury. And so I'm concerned about it because I expect him to have a slow start. But what I am concerned about is he ever going to be able to get back to the level where he was? I think a lot of us in Raider Nation were very positive and optimistic, and we just assumed that he's going to pick up right where he left off. Well, that might not be the case. He might not get that explosion back quick enough, or the mental fortitude to play with that reckless abandonment that he played with before. And it may take time for him to get there. And that time, he signed a 1-year deal with the Raiders. That time may not be this year. And unfortunately, if it's not this year, then it may not be with the Raiders. But I do think eventually he'll get back to where he was. I just hope it is this year. And then I hope his career, he continues a great career with the Raiders and is able to build off that. But I am concerned about it because the defense, especially with the cornerbacks we have, is going to be predicated. The success is going to be predicated on that defensive line causing havoc. And if he's not where he was at the end of 2023, then it makes it harder for them to be as successful defense on the defense. So I am concerned. Let's go on to the next one. Next question here. We have here from D-Man. It says here, should the Raiders look for, this is going to be good. You're going to love this one here, Rocco. Trading for Anthony Richardson. All cards on the table about Anthony Richardson here, Rocco.
I absolutely loved Anthony Richardson coming out in the draft. Yeah, I'd be very interested, depending on what the compensation would be. Yeah, I think you probably wouldn't have to give up all that much. I think he would make a lot of sense. I read Pete Carroll was very interested when he was at Seattle at the time when Richardson was coming out. You could see him fitting with the Chip Kelly. Bring him in if the cost isn't much. The cost would have to be very reasonable. If you bring him in as the backup now, especially with the AOC injury, and see what you have and see if he develops, under Geno Smith, I would definitely be interested.
All right. Before I give you my take on that, what would you be willing to give up? What's the max you'd be willing to give up for him?
That's a good question. 4th round pick.
4th round. Fair enough. And see, this is the thing. I agree. While I agree that, they may not get a lot for him. I mean, we're in the quarterback world, man. And we've seen Sam Darnold, who failed miserably for the Jets, go for like 2 second-round picks, when they got traded. Where did he get traded? Carolina, maybe, or wherever he got. They traded him for 2 second-round picks for a guy who failed, and he was still young and just a highly drafted quarterback. And Anthony Richardson's in a similar boat. He's still super young, still younger than a lot of quarterbacks that just came out of the draft. And obviously, as we all know, a ridiculous athlete. Me personally, I kind of would stay away from that. It would have to be, they'd have to really ask me for just a bag of chips and maybe a can of Coke for him. If they ask for more than that, like if they ask for, some mozzarella sticks or something to go with it, then I'd have to pause. I think he's super talented, and it's not that I don't like him, but I think it's just he's been so injured. He hasn't had a lot of time. His biggest issue has been coming out was he doesn't have a lot of experience. Well, he's played 15 games in the last 2 years, so his experience is still not there. Obviously to take a flyer on him, he can't hurt you, but at the same time, I don't know. Are you better off just finding a guy that you like your own, keeping that 4th round pick and finding your own guy as opposed to trying to fix somebody else's problem? So I'd be a little hesitant to make a move on him unless the price was really, really low, which I don't know if they'll give him up for something too low. Last question of the day. Who will be the Raiders' starting defensive tackles?
I think it'll be Butler and Lulu. I could see it being Booker, but I'm going to go with Butler and Lulu.
I think week 1 it will be Lulu, and I think by week 5 Booker will be in there. I think I got high hopes for Booker. I like the way he moves. So it's going to be interesting to see how. But as you know as well, and you've alluded to earlier, it's going to be a rotation. All these guys are going to get in there. All these guys are going to get opportunities. And you know what? Maybe it's a guy like Pegues. He's been playing really well in the preseason. Maybe just give him some more experience, and this guy's going to be out there causing some havoc. So that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode of the Silver and BlackCast, where the takes are tough, the loyalty is lifelong, and the nation's always watching. Just always remember, win, lose, or tie, Raider Nation till we die. We're going to be back soon with more fire, more passion, and more reasons to believe in this excellence. Raider Nation, just win, baby.
Just win, baby.